Welcome, everyone. I wanted to just review the inherited versus acquired traits PowerPoint, as well as talk a little bit more about nature and nurture. That was something that I missed a little bit on the last clip, but I wanted to come back and re-emphasize all of that. So nature is the idea of genetics, physical attributes, things that are created by your genes, while nurture is based more in behavioral behavioral outcomes, such as uh, the outcome of yourself in today's society, how you grew up, where you lived, the type of culture you adopted, those types of things. So nature is more ingrained in us. It's our genetics, our DNA, while nurture it depends upon the environment we live in, how we grow up, who we interact with, those types of things. So in that, to take another step forward, the more genetically similar we are to each other, or the more related we are to each other, the more genetically similar we are to each other. So when we're talking about nature and nurture, experiments often are conducted with twins. They're called the twin studies. And this is because when they are identical twins, they have the exact same DNA, except with how they grow up. So their nurture part is a little different from each other, but their nature part, which is the genes and all of that inherited down from the parents, is similar or the same. So in that way, there were some studies done, and if the twins were separated at birth, say one lived in the United States, the other lived in Mexico, had completely different lives. Maybe one grew up in a rich suburban family, the other grew up in maybe a poor family, and just the cultural differences between the two areas. You would expect that there would be a lot of differences. But research has found that they have a lot of overriding similarities even then. So even with that cultural difference, there is something to be said about genetics and how you react in a situation. Of course, it depends upon how traumatic an experience is, how much it affects the person. So in families, sometimes a traumatic experience may happen to a family member, maybe a sibling. And if you are far enough in age, it might not affect you as if you were just a year or so apart and always together, it might affect you more. And so when trauma happens in families, it has kind of a rippling effect where it affects the people around you, but as you go outside of each new circle, it's less and less. So that's something to just keep tucked in the back of your mind as we move forward, when we're talking about different mental health issues and how we address all that. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and look at this PowerPoint. Okay, so we can skip this section, but take note of the inherited versus acquired traits. So think of inherited as nature, think of acquired as nurture. I'll go to here. So you're a unique individual. Thousands of characteristics make you who you are. Characteristics are also called traits. Those could be eye color, basketball skills, height. So if you see here, they are mixing up biological or genetics with behavioral outcomes. And that's something that you also want to consider, in that genes do affect behavioral outcomes. It has suggested that people who have certain characteristics or traits have a higher tendency to do well in math or do well in science or, whatever that may be. But it doesn't affect it as much as society may give it credit for, if that makes sense. So it is a factor, but it might not be as much of a factor. But that's something for you to kind of investigate and figure out for yourself, especially when we're talking about different skill sets. Okay. So traits can be physical, which we talked about, such as eye color, hand size, foot size, height, how symmetrical the face is, ear shape, placement of eyes, shape of kidneys, all of that. And traits can also be behavioral. So it could have to do with language, migration, hibernation, fetching things. This is an example of a dog showing different behavioral outcomes. So, if a dog breed is, say, a pointer dog, then it is more likely to fetch things or go hunting than, say, Chihuahua. So this idea of ingrained behaviors can particularly be applied to dogs and animals, as well as humans, but it's a little easier to visualize with dogs. Okay, there are types of traits: inherited, or nature, or acquired, and nurture. So these inherited traits are encoded in your DNA. Sometimes they're called instincts. Because inherited traits are coded in DNA, they can be passed on to the next generation. Sometimes traits are not positive. So if someone has MS, sometimes they decide not to have kids so that it isn't passed down to the next generation. Okay, so now we are going on to the next slide. This talks about acquired traits. These are not in your DNA. Some examples are things you learned, such as riding a bike, reading, writing, and things that happen to you. So maybe you cutting your hair, perhaps you breaking a bone. It's not more likely for you to pass on a broken bone to your genetic offspring. So, that's something that happened to you and it affected your body physically, but it's not going to continue in the next generation. Acquired traits cannot be passed on to the offspring. They are not in the DNA or genes. So physical traits can be both inherited and acquired. So right here, you have the eye color, that's inherited, and acquired. If you are a burn victim, or you have, if you lose your hearing due to things outside of your control, all of these things can be physical traits that happen to you, and that changes your body, but it isn't something that will be passed down to the next person. Behavioral traits can be both. So how fish swim is based on their inherited traits. So just their patterns, where they go, how they organize the swimming patterns. And it's also acquired, such as playing the piano. If you notice, behavioral traits that are inherited are more common in animals, such as dogs, fish, dolphins, whales. Whales actually have their own language. They are extremely smart, very empathetic, and they have some behavioral traits that are maybe a little bit more acquired than other animals, and that has to do with intelligence level as well. Some traits are both. So skin color is a combination trait. of course, you are inherit receive genes for the skin color from your parents, but also acquired if you get a fake tan or a real tan from being out in the sun. All of that depends. Okay. So this is just a little review to practice. And these are just examples as you go along that you can take a look at to help you answer the discussion question this week. So we're going to go to the discussion question. Oh, let me go back. Okay. So your initial post is due by Thursday at 10 a.m. 2 replies by Sunday. Please pick one of the following. 1, can you think of a human characteristic for which genetic differences will play almost no role? Defend your choice. Now, take a look. That it has to be at least 150 to 200 words. So make sure you are putting a lot of thought into this. 2, can you think of a family member who has characteristics similar to you? What about characteristics that are not similar? Where do you think these traits came from? Or do you have a friend who is similar in many ways? Why do you think you have these similarities? Did they develop or were they always there? Such as, does she have to be related to you to share common traits? Could it be a cultural thing? So just thinking outside the box, there is no right or wrong answer. Just please put some thought into this. Otherwise, I can't give you full credit. So I will see you on Thursday if you want to pop into the 11 a.m. session. Other than that, have a wonderful week.